Project Plum podcast.
Yes! Oh my gosh, I feel like this has been like a long time
coming. Yeah.
Yes.
We've tried to do this a couple times.
Yes.
But I'm glad you're here finally.
Nice. Thank you for asking me.
Of course. Well, did you want to do a little introduction of yourself, like kind of who you are?
Yes. Yeah. So my name is Makenzie. I am born and raised in Bakersfield. I'm like 5th generation that I'm aware of, but probably been here a lot longer. Don't plan to leave. I'm a wedding and portrait photographer. And gosh, what else?
Your baby.
You want to tell him, Halen? We have Halen with me today. He's going to be 7 months next week. I don't know when you'll release this, but he was born September 8th, 2020. Bless you.
Bless you.
At 24 weeks gestation, 1 pound 8 ounces. And he has quite a story. And then before he was born, I had 2 really rare ectopic pregnancies. Bless you again. And yeah, gosh, what else? I host a podcast and I run a conference for high school students, and yeah.
Yeah, you're a busy freaking girl.
Yeah, everyth's been on pause though since I got pregnant with him. So.
But that's okay. You can pick it back up
Eventually.
Yeah, and it's all an enterprise that he'll like he'll be a part of.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
which is awesome.
Yeah. And there he is. You can hear him.
He's so cute.
Thank you.
Did you want to kind of explain the beginning of your story of what led you to your pregnancy with Halen? Kind of like your ectopic pregnancies and everything like that?
Yeah, so my husband and I got married January 2016, and my husband is in the middle of 6.
They're interacting. They're staring at each other.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so my husband's in the middle of 6 kids, and I am the oldest of 2. And so he's always wanted a lot of kids, and I'm like, I'm okay with 2. Like 2 or 3 is fine. But his whole dream has been always to be a dad. Like, he has always looked forward to being a dad, and I kind of was hesitant. Like, I knew I'd be a mom someday. Like, don't get me wrong, I always looked forward to becoming a parent, but I just wasn't sure what that would look like for me. Like, I had a hard time envisioning myself with, like, I don't know. It was hard for me to wrap my head around being a parent and what that would look like, because I was so engrossed in my business. I started my business at 16. I went full time at 21, and like, what would that even look like? Yeah. As a working, self-employed mom, you know? And when I do stuff, and you can ask my husband, like, when I do stuff, I go crazy, I go all out. Like, I am like over dedicated, like, I want it to be amazing. And so I didn't realize, anyways, we'll talk about that later, how my life has changed since he's been born.
Right,
but,
yeah.
So finally, gosh, I talked my husband into like, let's start, let's like try to have our family, right? So we went to, gosh, where were we? I had a wedding in Hawaii, and I was photographing the wedding and convinced him, and so we actually conceived in Hawaii, and then a couple weeks later, I think
Was there much convincing?
Oh my gosh. Well, he was like totally on board at that point. I mean, when you're in paradise, when in paradise. So he finally, okay, come here, was all about it. And everything was fine. Like, I took a regular pregnancy test. I felt fine. And then, I think it was like the 8th week. My doctor was like, we need to like get your HCG levels tested. And so, every 2 or 3 days, I was getting blood work done. And slowly, you could see. So for those that don't know, like, when you are pregnant, your HCG levels rise rapidly, and that's what causes a positive pregnancy test. And when your levels go down, that's when it's a sign that it's a miscarriage. And then if your levels stay a straight line or kind of plateau, like they're not, your HCG levels technically are supposed to like double.
Yeah.
Like not every so often.
Like, I think it's like 48 hours, 24 to 48
it's
hours.
just like rapidly double.
Do you want to take him?
I'm gonna leave.
Oh, okay. When?
I was going to take him for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
In the amount of time.
She's like, he's crazy.
Is all over his face marker?
Is there stuff on his face?
There's not stuff on his face.
Just has scratches or what?
Yeah.
Well.
Do you think, Dada?
You're like, trying to make anything work. Oh my gosh. Okay, so where was I?
8 weeks, the HCG levels.
Yeah, so he's getting my levels tested every like 2 or 3 days. So I was going in and getting blood work done every 2 or 3 days. And I was just like super positive, like everything's gonna be fine, you know? And then we would get the blood work back and he'd review it with me and he'd call me and he's like, it isn't rising like it should be, but it's rising. Like that was what was weird. It's going up, but it's not going up like a normal pregnancy should. And so he kept having me get tested and kept having me get tested. And so then I started Googling, of course, which is like the worst thing you could do. And there really wasn't like a fantastic answer.
No, I feel like every time you like look into Google about anything that's wrong, they're always like, your baby's gonna die, you're gonna die,
yes.
like everyone's gonna die.
Might have cancer.
Yeah.
You might as well chop your leg off.
Exactly.
Yeah, so then I remember, it's okay. What happened after that? Gosh. Trying to remember. So after that, I started bleeding. That's what happened. So I started bleeding. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm having a miscarriage. So then I call the doctor, they get me in, I go in, I see like an on-call doctor. The on-call doctor was like, well, it's not an active bleed. So I was like, wait, I just started bleeding. Like, how is it not an active bleed? That doesn't make sense. So then she gets called out for a birth, and then they take me to ultrasound. And then ultrasound, they're technically not supposed to tell you anything. Like, you're not supposed to say anything, right?
I know, it's so shitty.
It's so frustrating because you're like, you know everything about my body, but you can't tell me. And so the lady's going, and she says, oh wow, you have a really large fibroid. And I was like, first of all, what the hell is a fibroid? Like, I had never even heard that term before. And she said,
I don't know.
oh, you didn't know. And you can tell she's like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. Like, she didn't know that she has a fibroid. I had a 14 centimeter fibroid, which is about as big as this thing right here. So it's like that big, and it was on my uterus. And so she's looking, and usually by 8 weeks, almost all pregnancies by 8 weeks, you can hear the heartbeat. Yeah. And you can find the baby very easily. So they couldn't find it. And so I was just like still hopeful, because they were like, well, the baby could be hidden behind the fibroid. The fibroid's so huge, it could be blocking the baby. And so then they're like, do you want to terminate the pregnancy? Because we don't know where it is. We don't know if it's viable. And that fibroid has grown so fast. And if you're unfamiliar with fibroids, like I was, fibroids grow super rapidly off of your hormones. So as your HCG levels are rising, so is the size of the fibroid. So it grows.
There we go.
So it like grows super fast. And some people have multiple fibroids and yada. But so then I'm like, they sent me home, and so that's how I had to tell my parents that I was pregnant. I got home and I was like a ball of tears, and I told my mom, and my mom immediately called her mom, who is a labor and delivery nurse for like over 40 years. And they're like, you march your ass back down there right now and you demand answers. Like, they shouldn't have sent you home if they think that it could be, because they gave you like 3 different options. They're like, it could be ectopic, you could be having twins, and one's in the tube and one's in your uterus. Like, they just gave me crazy answers.
And it's like, what do you do with that? And then they could leave you with the question, like, do you want to terminate? It's like, oh, okay, so now I'm scared, I'm worried, I'm paranoid, I'm stressed, which isn't great for pregnancy no matter what.
Right. So then I went back down per my mom and my grandma's suggestion, and I saw another doctor. I saw like 2 different doctors because I wanted another answer. And finally the other doctor, he's the one who gave me like, it could be these 3 things. I'm like, okay, so now you're sending me home telling me it could be an ectopic pregnancy, which kills women. Like, because an ectopic pregnancy is when it's stuck in the tube. Basically, it's that's a pregnancy anywhere that's not the uterus.
Okay. Yeah.
So if it's in the tube, it could burst the tube, it could bleed out and die. And so just there were so many sketchy scenarios that can happen when you're pregnant that you don't realize.
Seriously.
And so I finally asked to talk to another doctor. And he said the only thing we can do, this poor man, this sweet man, I grilled him with questions for probably 20 minutes. Because nobody would give me answers.
Good, so, that's advocating for yourself. That's what you should do.
Yes, and so finally he was so calm, and he said the only thing you can do is get an MRI. Which MRIs are not recommended when you're pregnant, of course. So I was like, okay, well, I want an MRI. Like, call my insurance right now. Like, because it's like the time is of the essence at this point.
Yeah.
So I finally, like, within an hour, insurance approves the MRI. Yeah? Okay, hold on. You want Tessie? Here. I get approved for the MRI, and it's like later that night. So I drive all the way to the other side of town and get an MRI. It's on like Morning Drive. Like, I didn't even know there was a location out there. I get the MRI, and again, they're not supposed to tell you anything. Like the radiology tech is not supposed to say anything. And it was like a really long time, like scanning, because it's your pelvis, and it just takes, anyways. So then I get out, I'm in the waiting room, waiting for the results from the doctor who's reading it from his house on his laptop, which is super cool. And the doctor calls the tech, and the tech's like, okay, I'll tell her. Great, hangs up. Makenzie, the doctor said you need to go to Mercy Southwest immediately and ask for Dr. Lopez. He knows you're coming. And that's all he told me. He didn't tell me nothing. Like that was it. And so I'm like, why else would I be going all the way to the emergency room on the other side of town to see a doctor I don't even know, if it wasn't like going to be surgery or something, bad news, you know? Yeah. So then and I had a wedding the next day.
Oh my gosh.
I'm making phone calls. I'm like super apologizing to my bride the next day. Like I get other photographers in place for the wedding. And then I show up at the hospital. They still haven't told me what's happening to me. And then I get called back into the ER. They're like hooking me up for an IV. And I finally, like this nurse, this young man walks over and he said, Makenzie Holler, you're having an ectopic pregnancy? And I looked at him and I said, oh, I am?
Oh
and
my
he
gosh.
said, I'm so sorry, nobody told you. Please follow me. And then he takes me into another room, which is where they prep you for getting like admitted. And
that was huge. That was a man fight.
That was so big. Oh my gosh, glad that everybody could hear that. And so they take me back, and William actually took a picture of me sitting in this like recliner, getting the IV in, and my head is just back because I'm like trying to process so quickly, you know? Are you familiar with the Enneagram?
No. Oh, yes, I am, yeah. Because I'm an Enneagram 7.
Okay, so yeah. I'm a 4, but I, like, the wings on a 4 are 5 and 3, and so when I'm in stress, I immediately am trying to process super, super fast. Is he coming back?
Yeah, I think he's coming back. Oh, come here. See, thanks, Dad.
So happy.
Let this open or close?
Close, please. Thanks, love you.
So, basically Dr. Lopez comes in, who I've never met, who is an OB at the clinic that I went to, because they have all these doctors, and he comes in, and meanwhile I'm trying to text my mom, who's in the waiting room, and she's, looking up Dr. Lopez to see, like, his history. He specializes in...
Is he good enough for my daughter?
Exactly, that's my mom. And so she was looking up everything, and he apparently, like, specialized in laparoscopic surgeries. And so he comes in very calm, and he tells me and explains the whole thing that I have an ectopic... Oh my goodness! I have an ectopic pregnancy. I'm having surgery at 5 in the morning. And so I stayed the rest of the night, had surgery in the morning. And laparoscopic is where they went in through my belly button and then one on each side. So then I woke up and he explained everything and said that the fibroid, like the baby was behind the fibroid, right where the tube meets your uterus. So it was like so close to making it into the uterus, but the fibroid was in the way.
Now you said you were trying to process it, but like, did you experience any grief in the hospital? Like, were you devastated in the hospital, or did that?
Yeah, definitely. And then I think so I was in a car accident in 2013, and something the physical therapist said to me then when I broke my pelvis was, for every day that you don't, like, for every day you don't do something, for every day you don't do something, you're going to lose 3 days of progress. And so I have kind of always hung on to that as like a mental, physical, spiritual note and a reminder that like I need to keep moving. And I was like, I will process when I get home. Like that was my whole thought. Like I'm going to take care of myself physically here. I will deal with the emotional stuff when I get home. That's kind of was my thought.
It just reminds me because like similarly in my miscarriage, when I found out I was miscarrying, I went in for the 12-week appointment when they do like a scan or for the 12 weeks, and I went in, and she just goes, "You need to go upstairs and see Dr. So-and-so." Really? And I immediately knew something was wrong. Like, you can just feel it in your gut. And so I walked out of that room, and I just started bawling. And my husband, Trevor, he was like, "Everything's fine. You need to not think the worst right now. Like, we haven't even been told anything." And I just knew. I just knew something was up. And I was like, they wouldn't be sending me upstairs without answers. It's like a death call. And I went upstairs, and the doctor comes in, and he goes, "So what do you want to do?" And I'm like, "About what?" And he's like, "Do you want a DNC or do you want the pill?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "You're miscarrying." And I just lost it. I'm like, "What do you mean I'm miscarrying?" You know? And I just couldn't handle it. Like, I was just so, and I don't even think I cried right then. Like, he walked out, like, he's like, I'll give you some time to decide what you guys want to do, the next step you guys want to take. And he walks out, and I'm just staring at Trevor, like, what do we even do? Yeah. It's just so crazy. Like, oh, now we have to make decisions on how to flush out the baby, you know? Like, it's crazy.
Do you want it to be natural? Do you want it to be quick? Yeah. And so the way they terminate like a earlier pregnancy is they give you just a pill, and they let you decide if you want to do it naturally or have surgery. And it's just, that's I hate the way that I know it's to protect the patients, but I hate the secrecy around like the process of it. And it's really hard. And
all I wanted was like a doctor to talk to me about it, you know, like actually like, hey, I know this might, and like even offer support system or somewhere in town, a therapist that like specializes in miscarriage, you know, that's through, because I was through Kaiser, so like they could have even done it through their Kaiser system, you know, like it's just so dumb that they didn't focus on the mental health of the patient. Really, he thinks it's really irritating too.
So then after that, I wake up and then I went home in a few days, and then William and I were just like, well, we'll try it again, you know, and then we did try again later that fall, and I had the exact same thing happen again, like literally the exact same thing happened, same location, which if you look up on Google, like the locations of ectopic pregnancies, the one that I had is called a corneal, Corneal, and that's exactly where the tube meets the uterus. It's a very rare location, and so for it to happen again on the exact same site, exact same location, I was like, what are the odds? You know? And so that time I did lose my tube because it's the second time they had to do surgery on that area, and so like if I were to get pregnant, and like it could just, it's a weakened area at that point. So then he took my tube. And then he said, like, you really need to consider removing that fibroid because we think it's causing the ectopic pregnancies. Like, why else would that happen back to back? So then, January of 2020, I got the fibroid removed and saw a doctor that they referred me to, had surgery down south. And they remove it laparoscopically too, so it's through your belly button and like same incisions. They went through the exact same incisions as before, which was nice. Yeah. But the second ectopic, I forgot to mention that it was like a C-section scar, and I'm not sure why they decided to do that. But I have lots of different scars all over my stomach now. And they removed the fibroid.
You were so talkative. Do you just want to be a part of this?
So happy to be here. So get the fibroid removed, and he said...
It's right when you start talking.
Just put a hand in my mouth. That we could try to get pregnant 2 months after removing the fibroid. And then so when I woke up...
That's so soon.
I know. So my mom was really stressed out about that because she felt like that was really soon. But fortunately, he did not have to cut into my uterus because the fibroid was sitting on top of my uterus. It wasn't in the wall. It was sitting outside. And so... that I was really fortunate in that way. So then he removes it, and then we got pregnant with Halen 2 months after that surgery.
Yeah, that's wild, because even for the miscarriage, they said something like, I should wait 6 months or something like that after the miscarriage. And I mean, then I started Googling. Yeah. And I'm like, everyone else got pregnant immediately after their miscarriage. I shouldn't wait that long. But yeah, it ended up taking me like 6-7 months anyway, naturally.
Yeah.
And then so with your pregnancy with Halen, I know you mentioned you had I don't know how to pronounce this,
hyperemesis gravidarum.
I wasn't even close.
Yeah. So my mom actually, like the...
Oh, yeah?
But
Oh, what's wrong?
the abbreviated term is called HG. And,
Whoa. What's wrong? Oh. Oh, what's wrong?
maybe that'll help.
Yeah.
He's so chatty. How old is he?
8 months.
That's crazy. And it's crazy they're a month apart.
I know.
Technically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Technically, they're a month apart. They are a month apart.
Yeah, wow.
But your mom, sorry.
So my mom had HG with me and my brother. And HG is where you basically, it's the most extreme morning sickness you can imagine. I didn't have the most extreme. Women have had it way worse than I have.
What?
Yeah, my mom.
Didn't you, weren't you throwing up, every single morning?
Oh,
or,
yeah,
every single day?
Like 15
not
times
morning?
a day. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I lost 20 pounds. You've got lots of thoughts and opinions, huh? Lots of them.
He's like, you understand.
So my mom actually was on IVs at home with me and my brother. Because in some women who have HG, they have to go to the hospital to get an IV to replenish their fluids because they get so dehydrated because they can't even keep water down. Which is what happened to me. I couldn't keep water down. So I would tell my doctor, and when I told him how much weight I'd lost, he was like, oh shoot, puts me on a medication, that didn't work, puts me on another medication, that didn't work. Finally I had to take suppositories, which are up your butt, so that's fine. So every morning I would wake up and I would put the medicine up my butt and I would not get up until I knew it had, my body had absorbed it. So
did your husband ever put it up your butt for you?
No way. No way. Yeah. It was really hard to get used to at first, but after, it's just, you want to feel better, you know?
No, 100%. I didn't even know that it got to the extreme where people had IVs at home. That's crazy.
Yeah, on very rare occasions, you can miscarry, and women, I don't know if women have died from it, but there are some people that research it because there's just no rhyme or reason to it. It's just some women get it, some don't. Oh my god. Yeah. As soon as he makes eye contact, he's quiet.
He just wants to talk to someone.
Yeah. So I was sick the entire time. Basically, as soon as 6 weeks hit, 5 or 6 weeks hit, I was puking nonstop, and then it never stopped. It would, once I had the suppositories and I used them 2 to 3 times a day, it started to level out. But yeah, all the time. It was water, anything. I puked in the car. I carried puke bags everywhere.
That's miserable.
Yeah, I had weddings, and I remember one wedding in particular, it was in June, so it was super hot, and I was like, I'm gonna be sick. And so I went and hid around the corner, and I never got sick, but I was gagging. I was the whole time, and it's hot, and you're sweaty, and
they're like, does anyone object? You're like,
it was miserable. It was miserable. So that was my whole pregnancy, and then, one day I woke up, and actually, okay, so he was born 24 weeks on the dot. I woke up, sat up, and basically was oh my gosh, and just fell back into the bed because I'm I'm gonna pass out. It was just this overwhelming, I didn't even know how to describe the feeling. Yeah, it was a lot. And so I fell back down. I called my mom, and I was I feel funny, and I could barely talk. And so she was your blood pressure's dropping. And the only reason why she knew my blood pressure was dropping is because she had been donating plasma for COVID at this place, and her blood pressure dropped a few days ago after giving plasma, so she knew the sensation that I was describing.
That's God, dude.
Yes, absolutely. And so she immediately was I'm calling an ambulance. So I was no, I'm fine. And she's no, Makenzie, I'm calling an ambulance. Stay, So she calls an ambulance. She calls William, my husband.
And at this point, you're how far along?
I'm 24 weeks.
24 weeks.
On the dot.
Okay.
In the morning. It is 8:30 in the morning probably. And what's crazy is the day before, I wasn't feeling too great. And I told my parents, I was sitting at the kitchen counter, and I made a joke saying, oh my gosh, tomorrow I'm gonna be 24 weeks. My baby is viable. They'll save his life if anything goes wrong.
No way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so then I'm butt naked because I sleep naked. Sorry for anybody, but I was butt naked, and now I'm realizing I'm in my bed. I'm sweating profusely. Like I'm sweating so much. Yeah.
I'm just gonna put him in the swing, but keep going.
I'm sweating so much that my hair is getting wet. The bed sheets are getting wet. And I can't move. Like my arms are like flopping. Like anytime I try to move a limb, my arms are flopping around.
What the heck? Did you think you were like having a stroke or something?
I don't know. I really couldn't tell, but I was just like, it hit me like if I can't move, my front door is locked, nobody can get inside. My mom's calling an ambulance and they're gonna have to kick my front door in. Like that was the reality of the situation. And my mom would call me back and she's like, okay, just, stay with me, keep talking, blah, blah, blah. And then I remember my dad trying to kick the door in from the garage. I could hear him trying to kick the door in.
And you couldn't do anything about it?
I couldn't move. Like I could not move. And finally the EMTs get there. And I honestly think they thought that I was kidding. Like, naked girl, young woman in her bed, calling the EMTs, like, I seriously think they thought I was, because they get so many BS calls,
true.
But I think they really thought I was not being serious. I don't know. It was really weird, because they were like, what's going on? Like, and I was like, explaining, and they're just like, uh-huh. And then, the fire department, and then anyways. So they finally were like, okay, we're gonna take you by ambulance, and then you don't have any clothes on. Like, yeah, no shit. Like, wrap me up in a blanket. I don't care. Like, just get me out of here. Like.
And can you talk okay at this point?
I could talk, but I'm so exhausted. Like, it's all of my effort, and but I'm like, you have to see random people naked all the time. Like, you're in the medical field. Like, just wrap me up in a blanket. Like, get me out of here. And instead they insisted on me putting some clothes on. And so.
Oh my gosh! Like that's the main importance right there is your freaking
it was
humility.
So lame. So then my husband finally got there and grabs a dress, and like trying to put clothes on a sweaty person is a joke.
Yeah.
So then I'm just like, I don't care if my neighbors see me naked outside. Like just do it, And so they get me in the ambulance, and the whole time I am trying to I was like stretching my arms out like this. Just moving my fingers, because I felt like if I stopped moving, I don't know, like in my mind I was like, I need to keep moving. So I was like going like this in the ambulance. I think he thought I was crazy. Like,
now at this point, did you think something was wrong with the pregnancy?
I'm not really sure. I just knew like this was not good. Like, nothing had been told to me. I've just been told, oh, you have HG. Nobody said anything else was wrong. I was just going with it. And then I remember seeing palm trees out the tiny. Oh my god.
Remy!
He's trying to get out.
Remington! What are you doing? I didn't buckle this one properly. And that's what happens.
Oh my god.
What are you doing? Don't look at me like that, dude. I'm gonna get a blank. You really can't.
Okay. You're okay. You are crazy. You're crazy.
What are you doing? Can you handle yourself in there, buddy? It's like, no.
Oh, this is back to play.
It's alright. All the adjustments right now.
real life right here.
Momming podcast. But you got to the hospital.
So I remember in the ambulance seeing like palm trees through the tiny window at the top, and they were going like 30 miles an hour to the hospital. No lights and sirens, nothing. And my husband was following behind them and was like, why aren't they going? And my mom actually beat them, and she was on the opposite side of town. She beat them to the hospital, and then she gets into like to the where the ambulances pull up, and they're like, ma'am, can we help you? And she's like, my daughter is on an ambulance on her way. Her blood pressure is low. Like, she's 24 weeks pregnant. Why aren't they here? So they call the ambulance. They're like, yeah, we're like 5 minutes out. They were in no rush. No rush at all.
So they full on didn't believe you, like.
No, and I actually called a lawyer because I was like, do I have any rights to sue, like, over it? And they were like, no. And so.
What?
Yeah. So.
What do you mean?
It was
Like,
very
you're in a
frustrating.
life-threatening situation, you call an ambulance. Like, at that point, you literally could have called an Uber and got to the hospital quicker.
Yeah. So then I get, like, obviously because I can't move, they have you strapped down. So then I'm, being wheeled into the hospital, and my mom touched me. It's her first time seeing me, like, because she's talked to me on the phone before this. And she said that my lips were blue, my fingers were blue, like, I was freezing, I'm sweaty all over.
Was anyone, like, a EMT in the ambulance with you? Like,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
were they...
Not concerned. They got an IV, like, the port, like, in my hands, like, to start an IV when I got to the hospital, but they were in, like, no rush. And he said, yeah, I think her blood pressure is low. And yeah, my mom ended up calling and complaining to the ambulance company to just say, like, hey, look, I'm not here to get revenge, but you need to train your people better. And
did they have anything to say about it?
he was really, really mortified, the owner. Yeah, he was mortified that happened. So then I get to the hospital, and it was just chaos. Like, when you go to the ER as a pregnant person, they don't know what to do with you. So you immediately go to labor and delivery, which after my experience, I have so much respect for labor and delivery nurses, because it's such a specialized area of nursing. That fart stinks, Halen. Oh my gosh.
He's all proud of himself.
So they just they whisk you up into the triage room, and they're like trying to figure out what's wrong. And so I had to be back there for a long time. And then, because it's COVID, I'm by myself, so nobody can go back with me. You just want me to look at you?
Hi. You okay? Take a nap. I know you're tired. That's why you're grumpy.
He naps exactly at this time every day. Yeah.
Just too many things going on, Mom.
Exactly. He has FOMO. Anytime someone's here, he doesn't want to sleep.
Yeah, he's gonna fight it. So they're whisking me around, and I'm on my back. Like, I actually requested to lay on my side, because when you're pregnant, they tell you to lay on your left side a lot. I don't know why. I think it's because there's like a artery or something. And so I laid on my left side the whole ambulance ride while I'm in the hospital, everything. And so they're trying to figure out what's going on, and it was so crazy. There was a girl I went to high school with and I played softball with that was one of my nurses. And because of COVID, they have like the thing on their head, they have a mask over their face, so you can only see right here. You can only see their eyes and their eyebrows. And I remember her looking at me, and she was like, Makenzie, it's me. And I'm like, I'm so out of it, but also so aware in the weirdest way. And I just teared up as soon as I realized it was one of my friends that was in the room with me. And they knew I was bleeding out somewhere, but they didn't know where. And so when they realized that I had free-flowing fluid in my abdomen, he's biting it so hard.
He's rubbing his eyes. You had free-flowing
fluid. So they didn't know if it was like blood, amniotic fluid, like what is it? And so they just kept like trying to figure it out. And then they had me lay on my back because I was on my side. And as soon as I tried to lay on my back, I was like in excruciating pain. And that's a sign of blood moving across your body. So then the doctor comes in, which I find out later that this doctor was actually about to go back for a C-section at a different hospital here in town, across town. And he got called out to come do my surgery. And so I'm so sorry to the woman who was supposed to have a C-section by him that day. But he came in, and I surprisingly remember so much. It's okay. I remember a lot. And I remember him looking at me, and he said, Makenzie, we're going to have to open you up to find out where the bleeding's coming from. And when we do, if I have to open you up more, I may have to deliver the baby. And at this point, I'm just like, you know, this is what it is. My life the last year and a half has been medically a joke. Like, 2 ectopic pregnancies back to back, puking nonstop, like, bring it on, you know? Fibroid removal. I think this might be it.
Anyway, he's going.
And so I remember just being wheeled away. It was literally, I imagine it like a Grey's Anatomy episode all the time. It just was so, there's so much happening. And they take me back, and I remember so vividly a catheter being like jammed down my junk, and it was so painful when you're awake. Oh my gosh. And in a rush when they're like, because I was bleeding out, like internally. And so then I remember a woman holding my head, and you can see the scars on my neck. There's one over here and one over here.
Oh my God.
That's from 2 central lines, which is where they have blood go back into your body. The nurse could correct me on this, but I'm pretty sure that's where they add fluid back in,
Through your
medications.
neck?
Yeah, through your neck, because there's a main artery right here.
That's
And
wild.
so the last thing I remember hearing is I was yelling out my allergies, so because I have some weird medical allergies, and they threw like the stuff they put on you before surgery, like an iodine thing wash. They threw it on me because they were going so fast. They didn't wipe it; they threw it on me, and then they said, "Are we doing a central line?" And then he put a mask on my face, and I'm like, "There, take a deep breath, and then it was literally like, I'm either going to die or both of us are going to die, and William is going to become a widower and be a single dad, or like he's losing his wife and his baby today." And that
Was he in the room with you?
my husband was in the parking lot the entire time because of COVID. I forgot that part. So
That's bullshit.
yeah, William was in the parking lot the entire time. Then when everything was getting worse in triage, they said, "Who do you want us to call?" And it turns out, because of COVID, all these COVID times, they only call somebody back when it's like a life or death situation. So they weren't sure if I was going to make it, and they asked me who I wanted to call, and I said my mom. Because my mom is really, really calm under pressure, and William doesn't do good with blood. And so my mom came back, and she knew that, because her friend told her that, like, if they call you back, it's because the patient is most likely dying. And so she knows that now, going in, that her daughter is most likely dying. And goes in and, like, gives them all the info that she can right before they called me back for surgery. So my mom saw me in the triage room. And then once I was out of surgery, they did call William in. But the 2 phone calls William got in the parking lot, the first one was from my mom. And she said, "Makenzie was just taken back for surgery. It doesn't look good. Pray, pray, pray." And then the next phone call he got was like an hour and a half later. And she said, his name was Halen Dean, right? And William's memory is he heard past tense, meaning he thought he died. And so he was like, "Yes." And then my mom said, "Your son was born today at 1:38 p.m. He's 12 inches long, 1 pound 8 ounces. And you're a dad, and he's in the NICU." And William was just like, you know, like 2 of the craziest phone calls you could ever get.
Yeah.
So then I went to ICU, and Halen went to the NICU. So what happened when they opened me up vertically. So my incision's like 4 inches above my belly button and all the way to my pubic bone where a C-section scar usually is. Because I didn't know where I was bleeding, they kept having to open me up. So my scar is not a straight line. They were in such a rush, it's just like a mess. And so they're looking for the organ that was bleeding, and when they couldn't, obviously they checked the uterus first, but they couldn't find any bleeding. They checked around my past incision sites from the ectopic and the fibroid, nothing. And then finally, at the end, he pulls my uterus out with him in it, flips it out of my abdominal cavity, and I was bleeding on my backside, which is called posterior. And so I had a very rare condition called placenta precreta, and there's a thing called accreta. So that is the umbrella term. Accreta is like where the I would have to look it up to actually read the terms, but there's accreta, increta, and percreta.
Okay.
And then if you've ever heard of previa, like placenta previa, that's a more common thing. That's when the placenta is like blocking the cervix. It kind of is all in that same realm. And then accreta is like, it's a rare occurrence. It only happens in 5% of pregnancies. And out of that 5%, percreta is the rarest one, of course. And percreta is when your placenta eats, the easiest way to say it is it eats through your uterus.
Oh my
So, like, if this is the wall of my uterus, the placenta went through it, and I was gushing blood. So, the fact that he had no brain bleeds, he had nothing wrong when he was pulled out. Like, he had minimal, like, a lot of babies, like, they have bruising or brain bleed. Like, he had absolutely nothing. It's a miracle, because my body, as I was losing blood, kept oxygen to my lungs, or my heart, Mr. Tootie, and my uterus. So, like, my heart, my brain, and my uterus. And that was, like, it was really trying to do.
And that's why you couldn't move, probably, right?
Yeah, because the blood is hurting as it moves. So a woman of, like, our size has about 6 liters of blood in our body.
Okay.
I lost around 5. And so
oh my God,
I had to have nearly all of my blood supply completely replaced. Yeah.
Wait, what?
And so the fact that, like, he wasn't affected, other than being born extremely early,
Yeah. I
it's
mean,
a miracle.
yeah, that's
Complete miracle.
insane.
Yeah. Crazy.
Because he's needing so much blood too to just stay alive.
Right, and then as a pregnant woman, you have more blood in your body. Usually. Yeah. So that's what happened, and then he woke up in the NICU, and I was in the ICU, and I woke up with a tube, like, I was still intubated. I had a tube down my throat to help me breathe. And so they slowly wean you off of that, which is a very frustrating experience. And they haven't told me yet that they had to do a hysterectomy. Because obviously when your placenta has chewed its way through your uterus, there's no saving it.
Yeah.
And even if you try to save it, you would never have a safe pregnancy again. And so my third child, firstborn, and the last one I'll ever carry, technically.
Now, how is that dealing with that emotionally? Because you said that William wanted a big family, and even when you were talking about yours, you were like 2 or 3.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So again, like before, like when the first ectopic happened and I was in the hospital, I never like let it all out. I think while I was in the hospital, I was just in such survival mode, and I feel like I was for so long, and maybe I still am. But I don't know. I kept thinking about that physical therapist from years ago saying, for every day you don't do anything, you're going to lose 3 days of progress. And so having a giant incision, like my whole thought was like, I have to focus on him. I have to focus on me because he needs me, and I have to focus on him. So that just became
The norm.
my focus. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I couldn't even really think about, like, I'm never going to have another, because my mom immediately brought up, like, you could adopt, you could do surrogacy, you could do, but I wasn't really in a place to think about that.
Yeah.
And so I just kept my focus on him. Because when I woke up and I realized he was alive, and they brought a picture to me, it was like a 4x6 picture of him that they took a picture on a little point shoot camera. My first thought was like, I can't leave without him. Like,
Yeah.
I have to, like, he has to come home with me.
That's what I told, because I was induced, and a funny story about how William couldn't come in. I was scheduled to be induced, but I started contracting beforehand, and I called them and I was like, I need to come in, and they're like, well, we can't advise you on what to do over the phone, but if you come in, your husband cannot come in an emergency, but he can come in during the induction. And I'm like,
gosh.
well, and so I'm just like held out till
Yeah.
that point, but what else was I going to say? I was going to say something else, but then I completely spaced. Yeah, about Never mind. Go.
Okay. But, yeah, so William, my mom was like begging them to let William come and see me in ICU. Because since I said I wanted to see my mom when I was originally in triage, she had to stay with me. So if she left, she couldn't come back into the hospital. And then if, like, it was like one or the other. But thank goodness I did pick my mom, because then she was able to stay with me the week I was recovering and showed me how to pump, like, was helping me with recovery. And then grandparents aren't allowed to go in the NICU, but William could because he's a parent. So it worked out. As frustrating it was not to have my husband with me, I really think it was the best scenario, having my mom with me. Plus, like, when you become a mom, you have a whole new found respect for your own mom. And it was really special to have my mom there and help me through all that. It was hard though, because when I would pump and she would take my milk down to the NICU, like, she's not allowed to step foot. And Halen was, like, his bed was literally 15 feet away from the front door. So she could see his isolette, but she couldn't see him. And so she's just like, here's the milk, there's my baby, you know, my grandbaby. Yeah. So nobody met him except for me and William for 4 months.
Well, I don't remember what I was going to say, but I was going to say that I told my husband when I was induced that if anything ended up wrong, because I was induced at 37 weeks, to just take the baby and run, because I didn't want him to go into the NICU. I was like, we are not going to be separated now.
Yeah.
But how long did it take for you to meet Halen yourself?
So I was in the, I was in ICU for, where did that passy go? Oh, here it is. Here. I was in ICU for a day, and then I met him, so he was born 1:38 p.m. on a Tuesday, so I met him like Wednesday night, like late Wednesday night, probably like 10 or 11 p.m. at night, because I got to my room, and then I asked, like, I really want to see my baby. And technically, because of COVID, there's visiting hours now for the NICU, but because I was a patient in the hospital, they let me go see him, and so that was quite a thing, because there's nothing, I don't know how to explain, like, seeing such a fragile human for the first time, because he is fully breathing, heart beating, moving, skin like paper, like, and it's crazy, like, just a complete miracle. And so, and I couldn't get up, like, I could barely move, you know.
Were you fully there? Like, were you, mm-hmm. I know they probably, so you were fully mentally there?
Yes, yeah, the nurses kept coming in. I think I honestly traumatized the whole nursing team, because they had never seen Preemie before, and they obviously had heard about it, like, in textbooks and stuff like that, but they had never actually been on a case with Preemie. And so there was multiple nurses that would come into my room, and when they're like, oh my gosh, you're pink, and they would touch my arm, and they're like, the last time I saw you, you were blue and purple and white, like, and so they would come in because they just couldn't believe that I was alive. And so that's why I think I really traumatized them, because they had just never seen something
Everyone
like that.
expected you to die.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
Because I remember your mom posted your first post on Instagram, right? And I don't even remember where I was, but I was out with Trevor, and I had already mentioned you because of your ectopic pregnancies, and I thought your marriage was really cool. So I've, like, mentioned you throughout, like, life, you know, like, look at this girl's marriage, like, whatever. And I remember seeing that, and my stomach just dropped, and I just ran to Trevor, and I'm like, what just happened?
Yeah.
Like, I felt so much emotion. I didn't even know you at the time, you know, and so it's like, we had talked briefly, but, like,
I think people were just invested, you know, because, and I'm so open on social media, and the post you're referring to, for people that don't know, is, like, my mom had my phone, and she posted on my business page and my personal page, and it was a picture of me, the most recent picture of me pregnant, and just said, like, please pray, like, she has low blood pressure, she was taken up by ambulance. And I think just because our journey to getting pregnant, like, has been such a journey, people were invested, you know, like, he was our double rainbow baby, and then to know, like, that he could be our only, and he could die, and, like, and I have a hysterectomy and could never carry a child again, like, that thought was devastating to me, like, to know. And so so now I still have my ovaries, so technically someday if we wanted to, we could do IVF, and we'd have to have a surrogate for that, or we could adopt. But yeah, right now I'm just like trying to enjoy him for all he is, and he's gonna be little, not that much longer. But yeah, so the NICU part was exhausting, especially with COVID, because the only people allowed in are mom and dad, and we never could be there at the same time. The only time we were allowed together was when he was the only baby there for like 3 days, which never happens. And that was weird because William was like, well, what do you do here? And I'm like, well, what do you do here when you visit? Like, it was just, we were so out of our element because we are always there separately.
How long did it take for William to meet him?
He met him like
Right away.
Yeah, right away. And he said he went in, saw him. Poor William, like, his family is so, they're quite the opposite of mine. Like, they're much more introverted, like, very calm, like, there's just not a lot of crazy things that have happened in their family. And then I come along, and I'm like, here's all of my mess. Yeah. So William, he likes to joke that, like, when we got married, his life started. Because so many crazy things have happened. So he got to go right in and see him right away before I did, and he said he like just started like weeping, like ugly cry weeping when he saw him, and then they were like, in his memory he says the nurses didn't know what to do with him because he was like sobbing, and they're like, well, here's a chair, and he's literally sitting in the center of the NICU by the, like, not even like by the bed. He said he walked away because it was so overwhelming to see Halen that he's sitting in a chair in the middle of the NICU sobbing. And then they finally were like, do you want to come in this other room? And he's like, yeah.
Poor guy.
I know.
That's so sad.
And then he can't see me. We didn't hold him for 6 weeks because he was intubated.
Which is already so hard. Like, I could not imagine having my baby and not being able to touch him and hold him.
Yeah.
So was that like emotional for you? Like, was that emotional toll?
Yeah, it was hard. Like, you have this desire to hold him, but at the same time, I just wanted him to be safe and be the healthiest version. And so, like, even they're like, okay, you can't like pet or stroke his skin. I hate those terms, but like, you can't like how you would with a baby, you'd rub his back. You can't do that. Like, you just lightly touch. And even then, like, you don't, like, he has a scar on his stomach that is still, like, it had to happen in the first 2 weeks of life. Because that, having leads on him that check his heart rate and stuff, and it ripped his skin, and he's gonna have that scar who knows how long. But it's still there, and you can see it. But, like, I just wanted, like, him to have the best case scenario.
Just
so I was like,
be
I'll do anything.
and happy, yeah.
You don't want me to talk around him? I want to talk around him. Like, do anything. So, yeah.
And then, even throughout the NICU process, when taking him home, you had even a crazy story.
Yeah, so Halen was in the NICU for 112 days, and he was originally supposed to come home a week prior to his due date, which was, like, unheard of. Like, a 24-weeker, usually they come home around their due date. So,
dude, I was shocked when you're like posting updates of him. Like, he went from looking like a micro preemie to looking like an average baby so quickly.
Yes.
Like, it was wild.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've showed, I don't know how many people, like, look at it. This is the micro preemie.
Yes.
Because as soon as, like, I told my parents about what happened, like, because I just asked them to pray for you. And and I told Trevor's parents because I asked them to pray.
Well, I'm so thankful for all the prayers because we wouldn't have been able to get through it without it, honestly. And then
stiff arm.
So hungry. So he was supposed to come home, and then I remember being in the NICU, and of course you have to wear a mask and everything. And I remember just my body was really sore. And I'm like, no way. Like, no way I have COVID. Like, because I didn't have, like, a cough. I didn't have anything. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I haven't been sick this entire time. I've been so careful. We haven't seen anybody. Like, we would only see my parents and, like, maybe 2 friends. And even then, like, we were just so careful. So I sanitize. You have to, like, wash practically your whole body to get into the NICU, you know? Like, there's so many extra precautions taken.
And you were going to the NICU every day, so you were doing those precautions every single day.
And and then I was just really sore, like my body was really sore, and so I'm like, should I get a COVID test? Like, I don't, and so just something inside me said I needed to get one. And so I got a COVID test the day before he was supposed to be discharged. He was supposed to come home on Christmas Eve. And I got a test on the 23rd, and my test came back positive. And I literally just, I can't even, oh my gosh, I can't even begin to tell you how much I cried that night. Because it's like, okay, I could lie and just keep going. Like, he's going to come home tomorrow. Or I can do the right thing and tell them that I tested positive.
It's such a battle internally, it really is.
Because I had dreamed of this moment, like taking him home, saying goodbye to all the nurses that saved our lives, like everything, like rolling him out of there, like literally pom-poms, you know, like I wanted the whole thing. And then they were like, oh yeah, no way. Like, so they COVID tested him, they did the nose swab on him, they tested him for all kinds, like they tested him for everything, and everything came back negative. But their whole thing was like, thank God you did test, because if he did have it, he's in the NICU. Once you're discharged from the NICU, after that you go to the PICU, which is the pediatric ICU, and that's a whole new ball game, and there's only one in Bakersfield. So yeah, he'd have to be with all new nurses and everything. So I sobbed, and I remember now, like, it sounds so silly, like, now, because everyone was like, this is such a short time, like, it's going to be over before you know it, but I'm like, I've literally looked forward to this for months and months and months and months, and I remember, like, laying on the couch, like, ugly crying, and William was next to me just, like, watching TV, because, like, he could only console me for so long before, like, something would set me off, and I would just cry. So then everything got pushed back a whole week, and then he couldn't even get discharged to me because they wanted me to be symptom free for 10 days, right? And so then he had to get discharged to somebody who tested negative, which was my parents.
And weren't you like the first case of this happening to? Like,
yeah, they had never, like, the hospital didn't have a protocol for this. Like, Dignity Health did not have a protocol for this because it hadn't happened before. So they had to figure out, and so I was calling, like, every day, like, do you have an update? Do you have an update? And then they finally decided baby cannot be discharged as somebody who with a positive COVID test. They have to be discharged as a negative COVID test. So then he was discharged to my parents. So then I pulled up to the hospital, watched my mom wheel him out to their car. And then even when he finally came home and I was symptom free, I wore a mask around him for like 2 or 3 days just to be extra safe. Because the reason why we had to be extra safe, like, as a micro preemie, he has his lungs were not developed. So he was intubated for 6 weeks, and we didn't get to hold him for 6 weeks. And even now, he came home on oxygen, and he is still on oxygen at night when he's in deep sleep, and in the car seat. So for a micro preemie who has chronic lung disease to get any sort of upper respiratory sickness would be really bad. So yeah.
And how do you deal with that with your photography business, like taking him on oxygen? I mean,
yeah, so I brought him only on like 2 shoots, and it was like family or like a senior, and where he's in the carrier, he's on my chest, he's asleep, and I'm wearing a mask, but like he's not getting anywhere close to people. But my mom has been a huge help, and she's watched him a lot. Yeah, he's going to sleep finally. Jeez. And so she's been a huge help. And so usually I'm super busy doing like 80 graduates, 30 weddings a year, and I knew when I get pregnant that I have to pull back. And obviously with his whole situation, thankfully, because I'm self-employed, I was able to be at the NICU every single day. And the community really came together and like really blessed us. They sent us so much food and gifts, and our registry gifts and money, and just all kinds of things that made it possible for me to take a step back from my business and just focus on him. And then now I'm like slowly getting back into business, and yeah. But I'm honestly in like no rush, because I as much as I love photography, I love him so much more. And I want to work a little bit, but not as much as before, because I just want to enjoy this time with him, you know?
Yeah. And has there been any like serious health concerns since sending one?
So the chronic lung disease will be like throughout his childhood. He'll eventually grow out of it. So
Yeah.
he could have asthma, but I'm like, I'll take it. That's so much better than any of the other possibilities. Also, he had laser eye surgery on his eyes when he was just after a couple weeks out of the NICU. And that is because when babies are put on oxygen before their eyes have fully matured, oxygen actually tells the blood vessels around the eyes to grow fast. So when the blood vessels around the eye grow too fast, they will detach the retina and the baby will go blind. So they do like a preventative injection in the eye, which he had while he was in the NICU, but babies born so early like him, they usually have to have the eye surgery to fix it. And he did, and now it's fine.
And any other expected surgeries or anything?
No, not anytime soon.
That's amazing.
Yeah, hopefully none.
And he's where he's supposed to be if he was born on his due date, correct?
Yeah, I believe so. So with him being born, you are just fighting sleep like he is.
He's like, I watched the other baby.
So Halen was born 4 months early, and so this is confusing for a lot of people, but he has his actual age, which is based on his actual birthday in September, and then he has his adjusted age, which is what his age would be if he were born on his due date. So his actual age right now is he'll be 7 months next week, but he is technically going to be 3 months old next week. So he is developmentally like a 3-month-old, even though he's 7 months old. Like they are a month apart, but he's way bigger, obviously. So so eventually he'll catch up, and they expect micro preemies and preemies to catch up around 2 years old. So they offer regional centers, like early intervention with micro preemies and preemies, to help catch them up. So it's like occupational therapy, physical therapy, to work with them and help with those milestones. And so he does that every week, and so we
That's
do that all the
amazing.
time. Mm-hmm.
And you probably work with him too. I mean, you're home with him all day.
Yeah.
So even just talking to him and hanging with him does so much. So.
Yeah. So technically, based on his actual age, he's delayed, because a 7-month-old should be able to do a lot more than what he does right now. But for 3 months, he's on track.
Yeah, he reminds me of Remington at 3 months.
Yeah.
Do you relate him doing so good to him being breastfed? Because I did want to talk about your breastfeeding journey too.
Yeah.
Because that was a whole thing in itself. Like, you're crazy.
Yeah, I am. Like I said earlier, when I have my mind on something, I'm gonna go all out.
I know, because breastfeeding, just a 37-week-old, him coming home, like, pretty normal experience.
Mm-hmm.
That was so hard to learn how to breastfeed, to pump and have a freezer stash, to everything. It was a huge learning curve, and you did it while your baby was in the NICU. So do you want to explain that?
Okay, so I was super concerned that I actually wouldn't be able to nurse at all. Like, I was afraid my body, like, my boobs wouldn't know what to do, because your body just went through all this extreme trauma, and then it's supposed to start pumping and like producing milk. Like, you're basically halfway through your pregnancy. Like, how would my body know?
And especially when you lose 5 liters of blood, like, they tell you you're supposed to take supplements to breastfeed properly, and drink a ton of water, and just have your body completely healthy to breastfeed.
Yes. And so, like, I'm obviously doing like my regular prenatals and stuff like that, but I was nowhere near ready to like start breastfeeding. I always knew I wanted to breastfeed. That's just something and it sounds like silly to say out loud, but it's something I always dreamed of doing, when I had my own child, is breastfeeding them. And so I remember I'm in the ICU. They just took the tube out. They just extubated me. And when they extubate you, you're not supposed to talk for 2 hours. And because it hurts. Like, they just, it's way down here. And so,
a little raw.
Yes, very. And I don't know if you've had this experience, but lactation consultants, we love you, but you're very chipper. Like, they're like cheerleaders.
They really are, yes.
Oh my gosh, the ones in the hospital. And the ones at our hospital in particular had hot pink scrubs. And I remember her coming down.
She just immediately annoyed you.
She didn't annoy me, but like, I can't speak. So like, I had nothing to say like back, and she's just like, hi, okay, we're gonna start pumping. And I'm like, I can't speak, I can't move, I can't do anything.
You just woke up?
Yeah,
You just had
I literally just
surgery?
woke up, and she rolls down this huge hospital-grade pump, and she's like, okay, here we go, we gotta get started. And I remember before I had woken up, like, they told my mom, and my mom was like, are you kidding? Like, are you serious? But their whole thing is like, if you don't do it right away, it may not, like, you have to jump on it right away.
I'm surprised that your body was able to produce milk at 24 weeks.
Same.
That's wild.
Yeah, so I had asked about that. I was like, how is my body even going to know what to do? And so I basically started pumping every 2 hours around the clock in the hospital. And at first it was just like clear. It was, and because I think my body was so swollen, it was just like trying to get like the water weight or whatever is happening to me off. And then it slowly turned into colostrum. And I remember, it's so funny now because like I ended up becoming an overproducer, like insane overproducer. I was pumping like at least 8 ounces out of each breast every 3 hours.
That's crazy.
Every 3 hours. And so I would have to like switch the bottle because I would fill it up and then I'd have to do another one. And I'm like so thankful that I was an overproducer because now I'm not producing as much at 7 months. And but I remember the first, like in the beginning, the lactation consultant would come in. She's like, here's a spoon. Make sure you get every drop off your nipple. Every drop counts. And I'm like, oh my God. And so I'm like, here it is, my 2 drops, you know?
Good morning.
And then, so I have pictures of when I was like first producing colostrum and I was like so proud. And then like, I still have 2 stand-up freezers completely full. So I think I
That's
pumped
amazing.
over like 50 gallons of milk. Yeah. So he had fresh milk every single day in the NICU. And what's amazing is he could take it right away through a feeding tube. And yeah. So he still has a lot to go. We have a ton.
Do you have a goal of how long you want to breastfeed him?
So I'm not pumping as much anymore, but I am nursing him still. And then we give him the other breast milk in a bottle. But I'd like to try to make it to his first birthday. If I can. That's my goal.
That's also my goal.
Yeah?
Is 1 year.
Yeah.
At 1 year, I feel like then we can reevaluate if we want to continue forward. Oh, yeah.
His hair is so pretty.
He came out bald.
Really?
Like, no hair at all. And I don't know if you saw, but my husband has a ton of hair.
Yes.
And so he was offended that the baby didn't have a ton of hair. So he was like, we need to shave it and then it'll grow back faster.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, you are not shaving my
Not
baby's
gonna work.
head. Yeah, funny.
But yeah, now he's a oh, he was making a funny face. So he got all his food, all the breast milk through a feeding tube for a long time. And then eventually when they get closer to 35 weeks is when they're okay with like, or 33 or 34, they introduce a bottle. And then closer to 35, 36, they're ready to like, I could try to start nursing him. And the first time I ever tried to nurse him, he latched right away. And I just remember like praying, like, please don't have a tongue tie. Please don't have, like, we've already been through so much. Like, please just let this work. And it did. He's a champion nurser.
That's wild that he was just able to like that.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
Yeah, so he takes bottles and he nurses. He did so good.
And now do you feel more confident like leaving him alone? And
Yeah, that's something I think that the NICU definitely prepares you for, is being okay with leaving. I can't speak for all NICU moms, but like, because some moms it's really traumatizing, you know, and it's really, really scary. But for me, it really prepared me for like leaving him with my husband, leaving him with my mom, and going to work or going to the grocery store, just getting stuff done. It made me feel better going and getting stuff done.
Well, you've already been away from him. Well, I guess you, like you said, NICU moms are already away from them
Yeah.
overnight and stuff. Because I was gonna say you had to be away from them when you went to Hawaii for a job.
Yeah, and some NICUs, like bigger NICUs, they actually have rooms that you can room in with the baby. Ours don't have that, so like you go in and out every single day. But some of the bigger ones in probably bigger cities have rooms that the parents can actually stay the night in, which is really cool. I probably would have never left if that was me, but yeah, I did go to Hawaii because I had a client who switched up her wedding plans because of COVID, and I was like, oh my god, how am I going to do this? He's going to be 6 months old. I'm gonna have to, and at the time when they asked me, I was still pumping every 3 hours, so I was like, this is going to be a trick. And yeah, because I was such an overproducer at the time, I had one of those portable pumps. I had the Willow, and that saved my like pumping supply because I could just keep pumping.
Yeah, you posted that video of you wearing the portable, and it was so funny. I was dying from
They're huge.
Yeah.
They're huge. They're already like size C.
So it looks like you have like the size Z.
Yeah, they're huge. Huge. So, but yeah, they were great and super helpful.
Look at him. He's suckling.
Look at that. Trying to decide. Like, I can't even imagine Halen being that big. Like, I know eventually he will be, but it's such a strange thought to imagine him being that big.
I just went through his closet, and I hadn't been through it in a couple, just like since he was 3 months. So in 4 months, but he's in size like 6 to 9 months now.
Mm-hmm.
So had to pull out like all the year stuff, and I was like sitting there crying, putting the year stuff, because I remember buying these things and not like thinking like he'll never be that big.
Yeah.
Like that is so far away, and now he's 8 months fitting into a year-old's clothes, and I'm just like, oh my gosh.
You're so big now. He's so cute.
But yeah, also, is there anything like you take from other moms? Like, do you wish you had a community to go to for micro preemies or anything like that?
So I was really fortunate. Like, there was a few other micro preemie moms that reached out to me through socials, and they told me about some Facebook groups. And so there's like a love-hate relationship with Facebook groups, because some people are super helpful and super kind, and others are just, it's overwhelming and they give too much information, or they're really opinionated and rude. So I was added to a couple different like NICU preemie groups. And as with him being a micro preemie, it is a totally different thing than a preemie. Like 37 weeks, even 35, 32 is very different from 24. And like there are babies born at 22 weeks, which I feel like I probably can't connect with somebody who's had a baby at 22 weeks, even though he was 24. Like it's a totally different ball game. Like, and there was a mom I saw who posted the other day, and she's like, I had a baby at 33 weeks. And now I had a 24-weeker, and I feel like it's a totally different world, because every day in the womb is like a major plus for a baby. Like any length extra that you can get them in the womb, like, is a huge difference once they come out. So a 24-weeker is very different than 25 and a 26. Like, but and for people that don't know, a micro preemie is born under 28 weeks. Okay. That's what a micro preemie is, and then preemie is over 28 weeks.
Did you seek out like people who have had specific dates like that matched yours? Because you're crazy.
Not really. Like I would just respond on the moms who posted about 24 and 25 weekers, and then there was like a couple people who I connected with. Actually, one of my neighbors has a 25 weeker.
Oh my
gosh. So I got to talk to her a bit, and I would text her with questions and stuff. But really, like, it was kind of hard for me because I felt like I just didn't have the capacity to connect with other parents at the time. Now I feel like I can, but in the moment, I just wanted to focus on him. Like, it was a little overwhelming for me to just add another thing.
Which is probably a good thing, because like seeking out, like, every story is so different, and just because someone was born at 24 weeks, like, it could be a completely different story. Their baby could have passed away.
Well, it's funny you say that, because there was a family friend of ours. I didn't know their daughter, but their daughter had a baby, and she was just so beautiful and was born early. And she passed away a week before her, like just a couple weeks ago, a week before her, what would have been her first birthday. And I was talking with my mom about that, and like, they prayed just as much as we did. Yeah. You know, like, so why? And those are questions like we don't get answers to. Yeah. Like, why does one baby get to live and another doesn't? And I don't know, but I think it's so important for us to share our stories. Like, and I hope one day she does share her story more publicly, because it lets us know that we're not alone. And like, there are parents that leave a hospital without a baby. And I remember there's a friend of mine that's a doula, and she was doing like a model call for postpartum moms who had a baby recently. And I was like, oh, me, like, I'm free. And I think it had only been like 3 or 4 weeks after my surgery. And she said, oh, but Halen's still in the hospital, right? And I I sobbed when she said that. And it's nothing that she did wrong, but I just realized, like, oh, you want the baby in the picture. Like, you also want the baby for these postpartum photos, and my baby's not going to be home for, like, 3.5 more months. But it made me realize, like, there are so many different types of postpartum, and there's so many different, there's so many different parents that are healing and doing different things, you know, like, some are NICU moms, some don't get, or, you know, then there's some moms that have put their baby up for adoption or still gonna have to go through postpartum. Like, just, there's so many different ways, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Is there anything that you would tell a girl who was in your similar situation if they reached out?
Man, I would probably tell her that she's very strong, that she is stronger than she realizes, and that everything's going to be okay, even though it doesn't feel okay right now.
Thanks.
I would tell her to find her people and let those closest few people let her be her 100% self. Like, cry, scream, let it out, ask the hard questions, and let those be the main people that invest in you. Like, don't feel like you have to let a bunch of people in. Like, let it be like that close-knit people that you trust. And there's no wrong way to love a baby. Like, just love them hard, and everyone's going to process their grief differently and their trauma differently. Like, don't let somebody discourage you from, like, if you want to sing and listen to worship music, then you do that. If you want to paint, if you want to go for a drive, if you can't be at the NICU every day, like, just take care of yourself, because if you don't take care of yourself, then you're not going to be able to take care of your baby. That was something that I needed to tell myself every day, like, who's most important? Me and Halen. And if I don't take care of me, then I can't take care of Halen. And, yeah, probably that. There's a lot more, but off the top of my head, probably that.
And was your husband a huge support system, in the sense, like, do you think that this whole experience has strengthened your marriage?
Yes, the beginning was really hard, but he's amazing, and he's a fantastic dad, and we've gone through so much together. Like, I can't imagine going through it with anybody else at this point. Like, it's made both of us stronger, and yeah, now we're just like, bring it on, you know, like, what else could happen?
True. And do you guys plan to adopt or anything in the future?
We've talked about
You mentioned IVF, right?
potentially trying surrogacy, which would be, depending on, like, the way we would do it, it could possibly be cheaper than adoption. It just really depends. So that's something that we've talked about, or adoption, just depends. So we'd like to try IVF and surrogacy, and if it doesn't work out, then adopt. So yeah, I don't know when. I got, like, super heavy researching into it, and then I was like, okay, I need to stop. I need to focus on Halen. But yeah, that's definitely a possibility still.
Well, is there anything else that you wanted to say?
I don't think so. Just, if you are struggling with having a baby in the NICU, just don't be afraid to reach out and talk to somebody, because you can go crazy. You can already go crazy being a mom, but being isolated, especially right now with COVID and going back and forth between the NICU, like, just find somebody that understands, whether that's online or in person, and talk it out. Or journal, or do whatever you need to do to keep your brain sane.
Well, thank you for being here. Did you want to kind of, like, give your socials or anything?
Oh, sure. I have 2 different ones. I have my business page, which is Makenzie Photography, and then I have my family page, which is private. I kind of screen anybody that requests to follow me, and it's The Holler Family, and you can find me on both of those.
Perfect. Thank you for being here.
Of course, thank you. This is Halen's first podcast, too.
Oh, yeah.
Can you take a picture?